Yeah.
Exactly. Anybody got a song? We start with a song. Okay. So I'll just, there's so much we can talk about with social media. And Susan said, okay, why don't you talk about the power of social media? And so I'll kind of get into that with a few thoughts to kind of start the discussion, and happy to open it up and talk more as a group. Because a small group, we can do that. Everybody hear me okay? I'm not a real loud talker, so perfect. So when I think about the power of social media, when I think about the word power, really it's about change, right? It's about what kind of impact something can have on society or on business. Now I focus a lot more on business and what things are doing to business. And if I were to think back, before I get into social media, you think about media for a minute and what media has done to business. And one of my favorite authors, who's dead now, is a guy by the name of Marcel LeBrun. And Marcel was one of these guys who studied media and studied the effects of media. So he said, what effect does media have on society, on your life, and on business? And he wrote a document in 1969 called Understanding Media, and everybody's heard the term, the medium is the message. Of course, if you heard the speech before, I only have one speech, so anyway. And what's interesting is no one knows what that means, right? They like it, so that sounds cool. But it's very insightful, because what it means is that media is actually not neutral. There's messages sent on media, but the media itself actually changes society. And the reason it changes society is because it has certain characteristics and it has a certain social effect, a certain social impact. So, for example, LeBrun talked about the global village, right? Welcome.
Sorry.
So, LeBrun talked about the global village. And what was that? Well, he said that was a social effect caused by the medium of television. And no matter what we were going to broadcast on television, it was going to shrink the globe. It was going to make, distant news closer. And so when we look at social media, we think, okay, what are the characteristics of social media? What would McLuhan say when we look at social media about what impact it's having on society, on how we live or how businesses communicate? And I'll make the argument here that the social web is actually having the biggest revolution, or will have the biggest revolution, on how businesses communicate, do marketing, and engage with their customers, relative to anything we've seen since the introduction of mass marketing or mass media, and that is television, radio, and print. Right? So what are a couple of things that are unique about the social web that are very different from any type of media that we've seen today? So the first thing is, every media that we've seen to date, that we've used to communicate, have largely been controlled by institutions, right? So a company will own the medium. So if it's television or radio or print media, they're all owned by companies. And the social web is not owned by any institution. And that has a fundamental difference. So if you're a brand or a company and you want to communicate and use media to communicate, you had to buy access to it from somebody who controlled it, NBC or CBC or this print magazine. But now a community owns a communication medium. And so that really changes, who's allowed to publish and those kinds of things. That's a fundamental difference. The other thing is, when you look at your role on a medium, as a traditional medium, you're either a publisher, a company sending a message, or you're a consumer, you're just receiving. But the social web has completely different characteristics. You're actually a participant. And what's interesting is participants are part of these stories. They have a play, they have an effect on what goes on. So rather than, I'll give you an example. Anybody familiar with Sons of Maxwell in Halifax and Dave Carroll and what recently happened with United Airlines? Anybody familiar with the story? A few folks, okay?
Yeah.
So here's what happened. So Dave Carroll, who is flying to Chicago for something related to his music, puts his guitar on the plane and decides to check the guitar, and ends up that United Airlines breaks his Taylor guitar, his $3,000 Taylor guitar. And when he arrives at Chicago, he's trying to figure out what to do, and he's complaining to United Airlines, and they say, well, you got to talk to Air Canada, that's where you bought your ticket, and they say, well, why would we be responsible? It broke in Chicago and all this stuff. And he goes on for several months trying to get resolution, and finally gets escalated to this customer service person who says, look, you needed to bring that to us right in the airport. We didn't see it. We can't, sorry, there's nothing we can do. So he gets no support. So what he decides to do is write a song. And he writes a song called United Breaks Guitars and puts it on YouTube. Now, he put that song on YouTube, and so here's a customer complaint. And next thing you know, it grows in attention, and it has over 5 million views, probably 6 now, and something like 30,000 comments on YouTube. And what's interesting is, let's just say he decided he wanted to spend $300,000 to get his message out about why United was giving him bad customer service, and he bought a national television ad spot and put it out there. It would have played for 30 seconds and died, and people would have thought, that's a cute song. However, he spent nothing, or I guess he spent some on his little video that he did, put it on YouTube, and it got so much attention that he was interviewed by Wolf Blitzer on CNN, he was in LA Times, he was interviewed by the media, and the story wasn't that United broke his guitar. The story was that everybody was rallying around the fact that United broke his guitar. So we, as regular consumers, weren't just participants, weren't just consumers of information, we were participants in the story, and the idea actually became a story because of everybody's propagating the idea and engaging with it. And this is the third thing that's really powerful about the social web, is that it's a medium that doesn't just send messages, it sends and records actions. Because what happens is if I put an article in a magazine or an ad on the radio or on TV, and you get that article and you like it and you cut it out and you highlight it and you send it to a friend or you dog-ear the page, I know none of that. As a business person, I don't know what happened to that message. I might be able to do some research and try to figure it out, but I have no idea. On the social web, I can track all of those things and really understand what's going on. So it's very powerful for business. But as I got thinking about the power of social media, what social effect is it having primarily on business? It has many, but I'll leave you with one that maybe will generate some conversation. I like to say this quote, that your brand is now the sum of conversations about it. When I learned marketing, we would sit in a room, we would decide what our brand should mean, we would, characterize its, the personality of the brand, the messages around it, and we would push those messages out on channel. And the reason why advertising is less effective now is, I have a friend who used to say, I'm not lying, I'm telling the truth within the freedom that the marketing discipline allows, which is really lying, right? Like marketing became not about telling the truth. And in fact, I remember as a kid, my dad would say, when an ad was lying, he'd say, that's false advertising. You ever heard that lately? Right? No one expects ads to be true, right? We just know they're lies. And what happens is that brands tell a story that's actually different from reality, right? And the social web, the power of the social web, is that it's rewarding authenticity. And what happens is United Airlines, for example, is telling a story about their customer service, and the truth is different. And what happens is the reason why David Carroll's video got so much attention is because he resonated with the truth. Like, all these people came along and said, yeah, I had this issue too, and yeah, they broke this, and yeah, I tried to get this issue resolved, and it really grew, and people propagated it because it was the truth. If United